Thanks. So to kick us off, Mindy, I don't know if you want to start the slides.
You also make me co-host. I got removed, and then I can share the slides.
Okay, I will make you co-host. Oh, you are co-host.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
That works. Thanks.
All right.
Wonderful. Purpose of our session today, as Regina said, is to review where the city is in its proposal to establish 2 tenant preferences that help fight displacement for residents already living in San Jose. We have been doing this work together in partnership with community for quite a while. I won't even say how long. It has been a long journey, and wanted to give kudos to Mindy, who is project managing this work to develop the 2 tenant preferences. So some of you or your staff from your firms may have come to the SVA.
Where's that third pile? Can you hand me that, Dana?
Sorry, if you're not speaking, if you could mute. Mindy, if you can mute her, that'd be helpful. Thanks. Some of you or your staff from your firms may have attended the SV at Home hosted roundtable that was on July 27th. We actually did it in person for owners and property managers. Since that roundtable, we have been talking offline, individually, one-on-one with a lot of property management companies, because we know we want to roll this program out in a way that works with the various procedures that this community is using as you lease up your properties. So purpose of the session is just, again, to give a brief background of what we've been working on, and then go over the recommendations that we have as to how we tweaked the proposal based on feedback. Mindy, if you can go to the next slide. And so we just did introductions, and Regina, thank you very much. I want to pay tribute to SV at Home for acting as convener for this work and for so many other things that the city works on. We truly appreciate your partnership, and we really could not have the reach and the contacts with the owners and the property management community without your help. So we want to really thank you for all of your partnership. The agenda is simply to go over the program overview quickly. It may be a repeat for some of you, but others may not have seen it. Then review the program changes that we proposed based on feedback, and talk to you about next steps. And of course, we're going to leave quite a long time, 30 plus minutes, I think, just to answer questions and take feedback. We are in the place in the process where if we we think we are maybe 75% of the way there, 80% of the way there. But if there is something that you think that we need to consider or potentially tweak, please, we would love to hear that feedback. And with that, I will hand it to Mindy.
Yes, hi everyone. Sorry, just trying to manage the chat and see if it works, but it looks like we might not have it this time, so apologies for that. But thanks, Kristen. Again, hi everyone, my name is Mindy, and I will just be going over a brief overview of the proposed framework. We will start with the 2 proposed preferences to fight displacement. The first one is a citywide anti-displacement tenant preference. And what this does is that it allows a portion of units in affordable housing properties to be reserved for low-income applicants who live in certain areas that have a high likelihood of displacement. And how we determine that, I will explain in the next slide. The second preference we are looking at is the neighborhood tenant preference. And this allows a portion of units to be reserved for applicants who already live in the same council district of the property. The preferences set aside will apply to 35% of the general population units, with a limit of 15% for the neighborhood preference and the remaining 20% for the anti-displacement preference. And applicants who are 80% AMI or lower could qualify for both of these applicants. And so as you can see on this slide here, this is this is a displacement track map that has been created by the UC Berkeley Urban Displacement Project. And this is the map that we will be using to qualify applicants for the preferences. So as you can see, this is a map of the city of San Jose, and the brown borders are the council district outlines. The orange census tracts are defined as experiencing definitive displacement for households that are 50% AMI or lower. The census tracts that are in red are defined as experiencing definitive displacements of households that are making 80% AMI or lower. And the census tracts that are in pink are census tracts that are defined as experiencing probable displacement. And so we are using this map to prioritize the residents that are living in this area and to help inform our proposed preferences. And in the next two slides, what I'll be doing is visually explaining how the two preferences apply to an applicant. And so for the anti-displacement preference, I'm using an example of a household that lives in District 6. And they live in a census tract that is pink. So that is a census tract that is defined as that is experiencing probable displacement. So they can apply to any subject property throughout the city. So in this case, in District 5, in District 7, District 1, and they would qualify for the anti-displacement preference. And this would give them a better chance of getting into these developments. And also as another example, if there's a development in District 6, they would qualify for both the anti-displacement preference and also for the neighborhood preference. And so with the anti-displacement preference, this gives people a greater chance of living throughout the city. And this also clearly furthers housing choices under the city's duties to affirmatively further fair housing. For the neighborhood preference, the example that I'm using is a household that is living currently in District 3. So there are two subject developments that are in District 3. And if that household applies, then they would qualify for the neighborhood preference. This household is also free to apply to any development throughout the city. However, if they apply to a subject property that is outside of their council district, they would not qualify for that neighborhood preference. But the neighborhood preference is to provide households a greater opportunity to be able to live in their local community. So what properties would be subject to tenant preferences? So city-funded deals for new construction and acquisition rehab. And for existing city-funded deals, it would be worked in on a deal-by-deal basis. And this is usually during a time when a developer comes back for refinancing, then we would add the new language into the loan documents. The tenant preferences only apply to general low-income units, but this also includes senior housing. This could include HCD-funded deals. However, we do need HCD approval, which we will seek after we get council approval on the tenant preferences. However, tenant preferences won't include units for special populations, for example, permanent supportive housing. And it won't be included for inclusionary housing affordable apartments, for HUD-funded properties, for units restricted over 80% AMI, and for unrestricted units. Once we do get council approval, all subject properties will be considered in process by the effective date of the approved ordinance. And as I mentioned earlier, the preferences set aside will be up to 35% of all restricted affordable units. And again, there will be a max cap of 15% for the neighborhood preference and the remaining 20% for the anti-displacement preference. And so the disparate impact analysis limits us to this percentage. And what this is a statistical analysis that we have to do to show that our program would not unfairly benefit one demographic over another. And so once we do have tenant preferences approved, what is our role as the city? We would integrate the preferences into Doorway, which is an online affordable housing tenant portal. And on Doorway, applicants would get an explanation of the preference. And on the back end, Doorway would geocode the census tracts for both applicants. So this means that once an applicant applies, Doorway would take that address and be able to automatically qualify them for either the neighborhood or for the anti-displacement preference. We would place the preference into new and modified loan documents for properties, and we would create administrative guidelines and an implementation manual for property managers. We would approve the lease-up plan and tenant selection plan prior to advertising or the phase-in plan for existing properties on subject properties. And then also annually, we would ensure compliance for the administration of these preferences. And so for the roles of the property manager, what they would do is set up the property on the doorway portal. They would receive the list of applicants and identify the units per preference and apply the tenant preference to 35% of the units in the property. They will maintain a single lotterized wait list of adequate length. And this is where we would really like to get your feedback during the question and answer. So essentially what we are thinking or recommending is that you will receive, or property owners will receive one list from Doorway. You would lotterize that list and highlight those who have the preferences. Fill the 35% of those units with the preference, and whoever is still highlighted or is still qualified for the preference would get slotted back into the original position from when you first lotterized that list. And you would start filling the general units from the beginning of the wait list. And the reason why we are recommending one wait list instead of maintaining two is the concern of leading to discrimination or having an unfair advantage between the two lists. And this has also been recommended by our council and by the Santa Clara County Housing Authority Council as well. And also as property managers, you would advertise alternative documents for non-citizens and that they are accepted. And then you would also qualify the applicants as well, including for one or both of the preferences. And so now I'm going to go over the feedback from the first roundtable that we had, as well as the one-on-ones after the roundtables. And these were the main points that came up. And one of the suggestions we had was to allow some flexibility on the required units mix for the initial lease up. And we agree, flexibility will be given if the next available unit rule creates an imbalance during our annual compliance review. It was also suggested that we allow units to be filled within 15 days if there's no qualified applicant on the waiting list that can be identified. And we agree, and we'll reflect that into our guidelines. But it is, however, the property manager's responsibility to make sure that the wait list is adequate for all of our applicants. And also because this will be a new program for the city of San Jose, it was also suggested that we have a program review within the first 18 to 24 months. And we agree with that as well. So that will also be included in our guidelines and also in our memo. To have a program evaluation in coordination with the developers, property managers, and community stakeholders. And the last suggestion that we got, and it's a little bit cut off, but it was requested that the city should indemnify developers against fair housing lawsuits. But unfortunately, when we brought this up to our city attorney, they said that this was just not possible at all. And this concludes my portion. And now I would like to pass it back to Kristen, who will be going over compliance and next steps before we open it up to questions and answer.
Thanks, Mindy. So since we last presented to some of you or talked to some of you, we developed a little bit further what we think the compliance piece would look like each year as our asset management team does their compliance reviews. So this is the data, and again, we're open to feedback. Property managers every year during the compliance review period would indicate just a handful of things. Number one, you would show that the 35% set aside that has a unit mix commensurate with the other units in the property that are available to the general public. That set aside is indicated on the rent rolls, the electronic rent rolls. And we can see that these units might float, but we can see which of the residents in the units qualify for one or both of the preferences, and that in total that the unit mix is achieved. Staff would check to make sure that the waitlist procedure looks like the guidance, which is to have a single list that is run through a lottery first to establish priorities for those applicants, and that the list ends up getting kept in one place in one single list. As Mindy said, we had spoken to Goldfarb and Littman about their recommendations about what the list could look like, and by having this single list, there are several problems that get avoided by the creation of two separate lists and then the management of two separate lists. So Karen Tiedemann, who has spent her life, I think, working in this area, really recommended that this is how we would do it. The third thing is that the city staff would double check that things, including the tenant selection plan, but anything else in your lease up documents would describe the tenant preferences being available and integrate any procedures so that the tenant selection plan was accurate for this property. The staff would check that the advertising for any waitlist opening or lease up opportunities, that the advertising itself was containing the phrases that indicate that alternative documents for non-citizens will be accepted. What we've talked to our lawyers about is just the mere non-advertising, even if somebody would accept it if, asked. Just the fact that most applicants don't know that whether they get a yes or a no if they ask for it, that in and of itself is a barrier to fair housing. And so the advertising itself needs to lay out the fact that alternative docs are accepted. And finally, to make these tenant preferences work, which is one of the reasons why we have had a long program development process, is that we really needed our online portal Doorway to be working, up and operating, and to use the power of GIS and embedded in that portal to figure out when an applicant comes and says, I live on, Santa Clara, and here's my address. There's no other way for property managers to understand it quickly and easily. I don't know, is that in one of those census tracts? Is it not? Like, you really need this matching and geocoding that the system's going to do for you. So we already have this as a requirement for all properties that receive city funding. And we are just making sure this is an opportunity to say that, yes, the listings have to be originated and kept live, that this needs to be the way that that you attract new applications. Okay, next slide. So just a handful of things to check. The other thing we thought about was, okay, what happens if there's a problem and things aren't done correctly? We went back and forth as to whether we thought like a kind of de minimis fee could get attention of big companies that have a lot on their plate if something was repeatedly done incorrectly. And actually we moved away from that. So we're taking the approach that this is just part of your basic compliance work that you need to show every year. And that, the first violation, if somebody, if a property does not do the procedures correctly, or maybe the rent roll doesn't indicate the commensurate unit mix is hit, whatever it is that gets checked, it's not in line. Of course, our staff would be meeting with the property management staff to make sure everyone's on the same page as to what the program requirements are. And then there would be another 6-month follow-up. We wouldn't wait a whole year to check and make sure that things were going better. So there'd be a follow-up meeting a few months later. If a violation happened again with a given property or company, then the city would send a letter of non-compliance on city letterhead, but this one would go only to the owner and the property management company. We don't want to alert all of the members of your deal team if, again, maybe there was a misunderstanding and then maybe staff turned over. We don't want to make everyone in the deal team aware and on edge around this. That would really be saved for a third violation. And again, we would have a formal letter of non-compliance. We would be copying everybody, all the other funders and representatives on that deal team, just to make them aware. And, the city's loan docs have something in there that says we reserve a right to pursue any rights and remedies that are given to us through the loan docs. But really our intention is to have the program implemented correctly. It's not to penalize people. Because I think we all want to help people who are, in the market. And this is just, our program is, these tenant preferences is one way where we can try to help people who are, we believe, more vulnerable than the average person walking in the virtual door, and try to give them a little bit of a leg up, a better chance to get a property or to get a unit. So the compliance, again, it's administrative and it focuses on education. We decided no fee. Okay, next slide. I think that's about it. So here's where we are in our process. And then of course, we're gonna want to hear from you all. So since the summer to this point, we had created the draft framework. We had the web page up with it. We'd been taking that to different meetings to try to figure out how people thought about it and get advice. We had public meetings in August. We had meetings privately with stakeholders and then made framework amendments based on the feedback. Meanwhile, we engaged with Exigy, who's the company that is programming the Doorway portal. It's the same company that created the Dahlia system in San Francisco. And they are doing this geolocation. I don't know if it's a plugin. I'm not sure the right word. They're doing this feature right now. They're designing it, and they think in January it'll be ready to test and see how they did. So it's right around the corner. And if anybody here is interested in being one of the beta testers, we are happy to give that information. Several staff, I think, are going to have to figure out how to beta test this new feature. And so we would love to have anybody who's interested, give us your name and we'll keep you apprised. So public approvals are next. And again, we don't think this program is super controversial. And we are going to say that we're going straight from committee to city council. And we are scheduled at this time for a Community and Economic Development Committee at City Council on February 26th. And that, assuming they cross-reference it over to council, we would bring an ordinance to council, and the cross-reference would end up being sometime in mid-March. Date TBD. And I think, as Mindy said, we had already gone to the Housing and Community Development Commission. And I don't know, like 3 months ago, Mindy, do you remember the month?
It was September 14th.
September. And first of all, they were very supportive. Second of all, we were shocked at how interested they were in it and all of the disparate impact analysis and the math behind it. They were very interested. It was kind of funny. But again, like, you know, part of designing the program, we know we are giving a leg up to some folks who we've identified are probably coming from areas where households are already doubled and tripled up. We will be treating them a little bit differently, but it will be legally warranted. All of the findings in the ordinance have data about why displacement is bad, and it's important to help people preventing to be displaced. And all the materials that back up the ordinance, the disparate impact analysis, all of that will be on a website, so that if anyone's deal team attorneys have any questions, it's all going to be both in the documents and available. The backup will be on our website. And with that, next slide. I think that's it. So, time to hear from you all. We would love to hear any questions you've got and hear your feedback. And we get to do it the old live version way, except we're virtual. So the topics, we would love to hear more. What do you think about this compliance escalation process that we were talking about? Do you think that that's adequate and fine? Or the compliance requirements? We're trying to do kind of a light touch on the number of things that we would check, both for your sakes and for ours. And then we really want to make sure that by being a little more specific, the fact that we recommend we'll be looking for one wait list that's gone through a lottery already, and then have individuals identified for one or more, eligible for one or more preferences, that can fit with how you operate already and how your systems are set up. And then any other questions or comments, of course.
And then I'm going to stop sharing just so we can all see each other.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, now reshare when we close out.
Great. And a reminder, we're still recording. And again, this will be posted in case anybody's colleagues could not attend.
So I have some questions, actually. We already submit a huge annual report to the city of San Jose with one of our properties. Could that be added into your annual compliance with this preferences? Could we just add it to the requirements of that report rather than having it separate?
Yes, this is going to be folded into, Rosa oversees the team of folks who do the annual compliance checks. It'll just be integrated into what they are already doing.
Okay.
So it would not be a whole separate process.
Okay.
Rosa, did you have any other comments on that?
No, no additional comments, but yes, it will be rolled in into probably the annual budget.
The budget or the annual housing report that we do where we already report all the addresses and if people were living and working in the city of San Jose?
I haven't thought
At
much
rent
about
rolls,
that.
It'd be at rent roll submission time, wouldn't it? Because then you'd indicate which units were occupied
Right. So in July, I
by the
think we,
preference.
that
Yeah.
it's due in August or something like that, July or August. Okay, that was one question. My second question or more of a statement, I'm a little concerned on the validation of address history.
Mhm.
What if somebody's homeless? They're displaced and they're in that area. How do you prove your address? And I get it's not supportive housing, but also
Right.
there are other people. We don't deal with supportive housing either.
Right.
And so, but we would take somebody who is homeless. How do you prove that? And also, like if you're living with somebody else, your driver's license, the bills may not be in your name. What are the validation for those two proofs of address?
Mm-hmm. All right,
I-
let's take those one at a time if we can, Megan.
Yeah.
Mindy, do you want to start, talk about how would somebody look at an applicant without an address?
Yeah, and so I think we are, as I think it mentioned in the presentation, we're looking at accepting alternate documentation. So for example, I know for the individual that is homeless, it might be a little bit more difficult, but for if someone is living at a home, but they don't have, their driver's license might not match up, we're looking at an exhaustive list, and maybe one would be your child goes to a school that is within the school district. And we're still working on that list, but we'll add that into our guidelines on what can be accepted, and we're gonna make sure that it's exhausted so that everything is encompassed, to make sure more folks can qualify.
Right.
I would say, just add on two things. One, again, these are for units that are available to the general public. And so we know some people who may be at, I don't know, 40% or 30% AMI who do not have a current address. I think they could be couch surfing, right? There are ways to indicate, and we would want to make available the ability for someone with an oral lease or someone who's couch surfing, staying with a friend, to do a self-declaration about the address that they have been at. And again, if there's any other way to like corroborate the fact that that's the neighborhood, that would be, or the street, that would be good. But when we do create the specific, we are calling them regs, the administrative guidelines, we're going to also do an outreach effort to make sure that everyone is comfortable with those details and may have more to suggest.
Okay, perfect.
So, yeah. Did I answer the second question too in that realm?
I-
Like, what are the documents?
Right. I think that answers that. I don't have any issues on the compliance side. That was one of the first questions, as long as there's no monetary penalty. I think that's fantastic. I don't have any issues there. I do have some issues though with lotterizing the wait list on doorway only. So when we begin a lease up on a project, we start a year and a half in advance. The minute we break ground, we usually have a website up with more or less an interest list is where it starts. We can certainly add the questions from doorway the required questions that we would need. That's what we've done at previous properties that have preferences, and we put them on a jot form when they submit through our website to just show interest. Then we lotterize that. And we would like to really just import anything from Doorway and maintain one list, because we pull it out from our software program.
Mhm,
So our
mhm.
wait list guidelines are all the same virtually through every property. So this is where you want the wait list procedures to match more or less
Mhm.
to your preferences, but that's going to be also in my tenant selection plan and my affirmative fair housing marketing plan that is going to be
Right.
done for the project.
It's
Which,
gotta flow through it all, yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
so basically my waitlist policies are still my waitlist policies because they're adhered over 90 plus projects that we have. We
Mhm,
run our wait list pretty much all the same way. And
okay.
when we do have a couple where we do have to import, and we just notate that for those couple specific properties on what we call a data sheet. So for all the projects where we have, because each of our projects has a data sheet of all the required funding, what's required for your property. So on those, we put the specifics. But I wouldn't want to change all my waitlist policies for each and every property,
Right,
if
right.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, can I ask you a question, Megan?
Sure.
So I hear you saying that you'll get interest from your website, and you may have applications filed in other ways outside of Doorway.
Yeah.
The challenge with that is just that if you accept an application or somebody's providing you info and it doesn't get into Doorway, you will not be able to figure out if they're in the right census tracts. That was the whole reason we waited till Doorway was live, to see if they're eligible for these preferences. So there's really no other way unless you want to like,
I can cut and paste your map. And
well, yeah, but what applicant's not going to be like, yeah, I'm right inside there. But also nobody knows census tract guideline outlines, right? No
right.
one would know if they're on the left side or the right side of that boundary, because I don't know what that boundary is.
I
Maybe.
feel like we could figure something out
Mhm.
among that, like through a jot form. I mean,
I would hope
and,
that
and a
if somebody,
mapping and something like that. Our website's pretty robust. I don't want to deter somebody from applying just because we have a 35% requirement, right?
yes, that's right.
And so
That's right.
I guess on this situation, how soon could I even go live on the Doorway app? Could I do it a year and a half when we break ground coming soon?
Yeah, I think you can do all the setup, and maybe Rosa or Rachel could add on to this. I think you can do the setup and then it can wait there while you until you decide to turn it live.
So this also becomes a small problem for us as well, because we have applicants who actually apply online and go through our screening process to see if they're even eligible, right? So that
Right.
wouldn't be a feasible option through Doorway, and they couldn't apply online and upload their documents and do all of that because it's in a separate
So
system.
yeah, got it. So this is so if Rosa or Rachel could comment on this, this is more about Doorway requirements in general, which are in place for every awardee. And we're trying to make sure that our whole portfolio gets onto Doorway.
Well, we're also, by the
But
way,
I hear you
struggling.
saying that like your own applications, your own website also hosts some capabilities.
Yeah, and once
So
they go
Rosa or
into that, they can automatically apply online and go through the screening process to see if they're even eligible credit wise.
Mhm. Could you then direct them over to say, okay, now get your name into this other thing? Or do you find that client unfriendly?
I don't know if any of the other property managers, I know you guys are, John Stewart's doing some stuff online and the EH is doing some things online as well. I'd want their feedback also, but I do
Mhm.
think that creates an extra burden for the applicant personally by having to
Yes,
enter
yeah, so
information
it's,
into two sites, right?
I hear you. And so it's either more of a burden on your staff because you now need to do this extra address lookup thing, or more asking them to enter their info in one more place, burden on them. So it's a little push and pull when you've got your own systems and we're trying to get Doorway to be complete. Again, Rachel or Rosa, if one of you could come off mute and comment about any kind of approaches to phasing in, especially with companies that have had more capability on their own websites.
I know, I was just thinking, I mean, so I guess I just have one question for you, Megan. On your website, do you feel you're getting more credit information, or the applicant is getting more credit information than they could on Doorway, or not?
So basically what we utilize it for is they go in and they sign up on the interest list a year and a half. The minute we break ground, our websites go
Mhm.
live, right? So they can continue to put their information in. We are turning on our online pre-application system for anything that's currently in lease up, which means they go in, they complete a pre-app, which gives address information, gives all that. And then it'll take them to the credits part. They basically screen themselves through our credit screening and pay online. And right off the bat, you know, at that point, if their credit or income, you know, qualified to even go to the next step. So then what will happen when we get closer to leasing events and inviting them to come and finish the rest of their application process? And this is primarily right now for lease ups, but will be used for our established properties as well. So then the next step is they are invited to apply online and they upload all their documents, fill out the application, do all of that. And it's all done in our software program. So we import the list, you know, into our software program. So are you guys familiar at all with HCIDLA? They're down in the LA area.
Yes, but
and
not on what they do. Yes.
Right. So basically they have a somewhat a similar system. And basically we just import their list into our system.
Mhm.
So if
Mhm.
they did apply on Doorway, it would be okay, but I don't want to document manage everything in that system as well as our online system. Does that make sense? I'd rather utilize one system and just import the list in. And if it's done by date and time on Doorway's side, when I import it into my system also is done by date and time. So they'll be put in accurate, correct order when it's merged together.
So can I just say,
I feel like we need to take this offline. It's
I
really
think we did
hard.
too.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think that, you know, it's important for us to work it out and work through it. You know, I guess in my mind, is there a way to have every applicant come through Doorway and then through your system so that you can have the information for everyone? But I think we need to have an offline conversation in order to really work through that.
Right. And I
Just
think
so
there are two different issues going on here. And one is about the interface of Doorway and your own systems. And then the second one about how do we figure out folks who may come in through another door, if you will, if they qualify for the tenant preference, and that, you know, how do we meet the overall goal that those folks who do get a better chance than somebody walking in off the street to get into this set aside, or at least not a worse chance.
Absolutely. And we would still be able to lotterize that through our own system. So we wouldn't just import it in and then not do anything with the information.
Right.
We would definitely lotterize it. So they would be
right.
given a more beneficial choice.
Okay. So thank you for that, Megan, and telling us more about how USA works. Rosa, did you want to add anything else about the system, about Doorway? Because again, this is more and more, you know, a regional effort for most municipalities. In another year or two, it's going to be most Bay Area municipalities that have access to either their own or a regional Doorway system. Rosa, what were you
I think Megan, you and I and maybe Dave Boff can get together and see how we can make this work Doorway is sort of a advertising vehicle as well. You would want to post there because we are directing all of our traffic there. So we can meet to see how this could work and meet compliance.
Oh, we absolutely plan to post. I mean, we're trying to get Mayfair Court online, and we've
Yeah.
communicated several times with your guys' team. And
Great.
Mayfair, we can't get up and running for some reason, but we do have Virginia Street on there. I mean, our properties
great.
are advertised.
Yeah, I noticed actually Mayfair on there, but not really.
Yeah, it's not fully, we're having some glitches. I
Okay.
think Tammy Pedroia, the regional, has been working with a member of your team over there, but Virginia Street is up there. So
Cool.
we don't mind. We love to advertise. I mean, we have no issue with putting it on the website. It's
Great.
just how it all interfaces
How it
as far
flows.
as one wait list and that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And
can I chime in here?
yeah, I was just going to say the statement that
Yeah.
Doorway is trying to make things easier for the users, for the applicants. And then we're trying to make it easier for you all to implement a geo-based program by using that tool. So we can figure out the specifics. Rena, what were you going to say?
Just from the way we use it currently is mostly as an advertising tool. We have the application link to our application and our process, but we don't have people apply through Doorway, and we don't have people share all their information in Doorway and all of that stuff. So we separately process our applicants according to the preferences for each building, which have complex regulatory agreement layers.
Right.
And so Doorway for us is a great tool to get the word out there and gather applicants when we open our wait list for our properties, but we actually don't use it for anything further than that at this point, and probably would choose not to if we had that option, just because it gets really complicated if you got these, because we do have certain qualification requirements and et cetera, that just we have to manage, and we can't allude to accepting applicants if they don't even come close to meeting our requirements. We would be in a fair housing issue then, because it's like, hey, I applied on Doorway. Why haven't you, accepted my application? Well, sorry, we can't. You're 35 and this is the over 55 process, senior property or something, those sort of things that really kind of, we just want to be able to more closely manage and not run risks there.
Rena, how many properties or how many units do you oversee? Do you manage?
Oh my gosh, units? I have no idea.
Properties?
I'm a director, so I have 4 regional managers under me. They're not all in the city of San Jose. There's quite a few of them.
Oh, I'm kidding. Yeah, I know.
There's quite a few of them in the city of San
jurisdiction.
Jose, but I'd say I probably have about 15 to 30 properties that are in the city of San Jose that are under my purview specifically, far more than that under John Stewart Company in the South Bay area.
Right.
We have a lot.
Maybe we
Rosa
could
maybe
figure
could
out
answer
some,
that. I have no idea.
if we could figure out some back end way to feed the data in centrally and have the system still identify folks. So this is kind of a design of the geocoding feature that we need to talk about pretty quickly, I think, with Exegy to see if there's a different way that y'all can use that feature on the system without having to drive people in necessarily for those companies that have a lot of operability on their own websites. So let's talk about that. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that input. Rena, did you have any other thoughts that you wanted to share about what we were presenting?
No, not at this time. I apologize for being late. I had another conflicting meeting, so
No worries. It's the way of Zoom. Great. Mindy, do you want to open it up? Sorry, I know Mindy was going to take the Q's and the A's.
If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. Sorry, there's no chat function today.
We tried.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to raise my hand on here. I don't see that
Oh,
option,
yeah.
but okay.
It's
But I
under,
do have-
to raise your hand, it's under reactions now.
Right.
Zoom changed it a few months ago. So go under
Okay.
reactions and then there's a raise your hand. But anyway, Katina, you can just talk if you'd like.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do have a few properties in the city of San Francisco where we're required to have a lottery, and we have a tenant preference for the mayor's office in housing and community development. So the process that you went into detail is similar to their process, also similar to the one Megan mentioned in LA. So each city has their own process and have their own software that they use to collect data. Now, we have some properties that are city funded, but also receive a percentage of the units are financed through HUD. You have subsidized units. So did HUD sign off on the lift preference idea? So once we submit our affirmative fair housing marketing plan, we need to include the tenant preference. But in my experience, HUD did not sign off on a lift preference. So how do you get around that?
Good question, Katina. Thank you. Mindy, do you want to start and then I can chime in?
Yeah, sure. So we had the same question, and we had a meeting with the Housing Authority and with Karen Tiedman, who is their counsel. And what we learned is that if there is a development that accepts project-based vouchers from HUD, we cannot apply the tenant preferences to those project-based vouchers. However, the general units we can. The only thing we can't do is if there is a development that is funded by HUD, then that excludes tenant preferences completely.
Well, and we're gonna double check the findings because for those of you that work with HUD in a detailed way, you know that sometimes they put out guidance and it pertains only to like the 221(d)(3) deals, whereas home funds administered by formula by localities, actually you interpret it slightly differently. So we have to carefully pull apart the HUD guidance to see if home funded deals, for instance, would be subject. Katina, when you say it was HUD funded, do you have a program or source you're referring to?
This property is a HUD 202.
Oh, yeah. That whole thing probably would not be relevant then.
Okay.
Is my guess, but we're going to try to be as specific as possible on HUD. But you are right. HUD in general does not like preferences that are smaller than the entire jurisdiction. And they find it just easier to just say that than to deal with the ramifications that individual jurisdictions could be doing things perfectly legal like we are, but they just don't have the bandwidth to do this across the country and look at exceptions. So
okay,
I get that. Now, HCD is a different situation on that. HCD's uniform multifamily, what's the right word? UMRs, uniform multifamily regs, I think is
yes.
The UMRs from 2017 have that say can't do preferences smaller than a whole jurisdiction unless you make sure you include it's like live and or work, the work part, make sure the work part's there. Or there are preferences that either help people at risk of displacement or who have been displaced. So our job is to present our analysis to the state, and it's not just the quantitative, there's a bunch of qualitative analysis too. See if we can get it through at a programmatic level for those. Yeah. Thanks, Katina.
Thank you.
Megan, you have your hand raised?
Did Cal
I
HFA has some similar things in their regulations as well, like HCD.
Oh, okay. Great.
So we
We'll
might
look at
want to
that.
circle back with them as well a little bit.
Yeah.
Because
Good point.
they do follow a lot of the same types of regulation as
HCD.
Yeah.
Thanks for the suggestion. And actually the staff previously reporting to Kemet on his team now oversees all of Cal HFA multifamily. So we will contact John Tay and ask that good question. Thanks. Great. Other feedback or comments, support or concerns? We'll take it all. Clarifications? Is anyone actually implementing anti-displacement types of tenant preferences in any other jurisdiction?
Really, the only preferences we have are the same like live and work and
Yeah,
that type thing, but it really isn't anti-displacement per se.
right. Great. Anyone at EIH want to comment, or Dinko?
We do have tenant preferences, live, work, but no displacement.
Right. Okay.
Unless it's a
Hello?
property that we're rehabbing. And
Oh,
so,
right.
yes.
Mhm. Right. Right.
Hey
Sorry, I
everyone.
think Michelle, you're going to say something?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I know Berkeley, the city of Berkeley is piloting a tenant preference policy, although I don't know any details really about it, but I think they're piloting it at an RCD building in Berkeley.
Yeah, they've been joining with us behind the scenes to them and Oakland to talk about Exegy and try to support Exegy's amendments to the portal so that it can do this geolocation. Yeah. We have been in touch with Berkeley quite a bit, actually. Mindy, any other questions that we wanted to get more feedback on or reactions to?
No, I think really it was the new portions, the compliance and the maintaining one wait list. So thank you, Megan and Rena, for sharing that. I think I've been meeting regularly with Exegy, and if there's a other way where we can get those addresses and just already geocode them instead of having the applicant go through that process, maybe we can do that and then give you that list. But I will note that and talk about that with them at our next check-in.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about it with Rachel and Rosa also. Yeah. Great. So,
José, could I ask a question quickly?
yeah, please. Hi, Matthew.
The fair housing questions came up in numerous conversations with folks, and I understand the city attorney isn't willing to indemnify all of the project managers.
That's right.
And it sounds like the discussions with HCD are ongoing. I think the other thing that we heard were two things. One was that for the city to explain the due diligence in terms of HCD, terms of the city attorney's judgment, that would be helpful. There was also a significant concern that federal fair housing laws can be different or interpreted differently. Some of that is clearly related to the HUD money, but some of those are just protections enjoyed by residents under the federal law. So there was a question of whether or not there was a review of the policy that was planned that would look explicitly under the context of federal fair housing law and existing case law. So I guess that was a question.
Yes, and thank you for being more specific on what the review would entail. I don't know if you were here for the slide Mindy showed about that feedback that we had received, but we are going to put into the approval memo that we'll do a program evaluation in 18-24 months and reach out to stakeholders, including property managers and operators, and then the community members who may have experience on the application side, just generally. The I just want to say, when our lawyers are opining as to whether something's legal from a fair housing law perspective, they're looking not just at California law, they're also looking at federal law. So our attorneys are kind of taking a holistic view as to what needs to get shown for something to basically preference, I'm going to use the word preference, some people over others. Our attorneys are pretty strict. I don't know if any of you have experience with them, but they're pretty strict. Our attorney is looking at the case in New York City. I think it's the Pordor case, and the court ruling there. So looking at, not just regs and not just guidance, but also court cases to see what it is that the courts have said about this area. There are not that many cases about tenant preferences on point. But really this hinges around, if you're going to treat some people differently than others when you're using public resources, it needs to very clearly show why this is a problem. If people are, what is the problem you're trying to attack? Like, how strong is your argument for us to, benefit one group of people over others? And so we are working on findings about the harms of displacement with him and trying to get fresh data on that. So if you have any ideas, Matthew and Emily, let us know. But the other thing is, the city co-sponsored, I don't know if y'all are aware of this, the city of San Jose co-sponsored with Somos Mayfair and with the Housing Action Coalition a piece of legislation in the last session that got approved in the last session, signed by the governor a few months back, went into effect early this year, that declares it in law that people who are at risk of being displaced are a group of people that are recognized under law. And therefore, this was so that deals could get a clean legal finding from tax credit counsel, from bond counsel, because the group is recognized. You can't just throw your doors open and treat some people specific, like people named Pam. You can't just be nice to people named Pam because without findings and without some warrant, something that's warranted. So that's what this legislation codifies, that it is warranted. So between the legislation and the analysis that we have done to put this in place, all of those things. Oh, and then of course, the direction in your city loan documents. Those three pieces should put folks on a pretty stable legal footing to follow the program direction. Did that answer your question, Matthew? The federal fair housing law. So I just want to
I'm not sure there's a resolution. I just want to raise it again.
Okay.
I think, as a comment, the concern was not that this was going to be a major factor. The concern was that it would only take once.
Well, I think
to undermine confidence and increase risk of participating in the program. And so any new program has those challenges. This one in particular is, part of the reason why it's so important is that it's addressing needs but hard to address. So there's no question about that. There's just a concern that we make sure that all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, because otherwise it will create a significant risk factor for folks we participate in.
Yes. I think our job is to sew this up so neatly that if somebody does bring a lawsuit against you, it would have like no merit on the basic idea that the preference shouldn't exist and why are you implementing it? So again, like we've done way more work on this than any other community that I've ever heard of to make sure that this is legal. We passed a bill to make sure everybody realized that this is legal, not just under state law, but also it goes out and pulls in the Internal Revenue Code for bonds and tax credits. So I think, as our lawyers say, somebody could sue the city any day on any grounds. It doesn't mean everything has merit. right? So our job is to pull together something as tight as possible so that if somebody does file a specious claim, it can be kind of quickly dismissed. But I know y'all are out there in the trenches experiencing this. It's easy for me to say. So yeah, that would obviously be part of the check-in a few months after implementation to see if there are any situations in which, you know, there were more serious concerns raised than others. And what did that look like? Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say something else on what Mindy had said, but I'll just leave it there. So, you know, our objective with our outreach is to make sure that folks are comfortable enough in identifying kind of these logistics questions that Megan and Rena were raising, that we don't just pass a policy statement, we actually pass a program that is able to be implemented. And it kind of meets your needs, or at least doesn't make your lives a lot more difficult, just a little bit more. A handful of boxes to check and a little bit more to do, but not too bad. So that's our goal. And our goal is, of course, to hear from anybody if they feel like they couldn't, if asked, they couldn't support something like this. We really want to avoid the situation that we bring something forward to a public comment, to a public meeting, and somebody raises a comment that we could have on something they were worried about, you know, that we could have had that conversation before we're trying to bring it for approvals. So if that's the case, we definitely want to make sure that we have logistics conversations or any other conversations. Rena?
Sounds like I missed a slideshow, so I'd love to get a copy of that slideshow that was done at the beginning. And maybe that slideshow included the information of how is this going to be, like, what is the mechanism that's going to be issued that would make this a requirement for all properties in the city? Is there going to be new loan documents issued to properties that have city loans? I mean, what's the mechanism there? Because we currently operate under regulatory agreements.
Right.
And those regulatory agreements do not include this at this point in time.
That's right.
And so what is that legal mechanism that says you have to do this?
Yeah. Besides us passing an ordinance, Mindy, do you want to talk about the phase-in?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So if for new developments, then it would be written into the loan documents as you're getting financed. But then for existing developments already, if you come back, it would be worked on a deal by deal basis. So for example, when you come back for refinancing, that is when we would incorporate tenant preferences back into the new loan docs. And Kristen, I don't know, you might want to speak a little bit more on this.
Yeah, I mean, anything that would cause you to ask the city to do something that would alter the loan docs, we'll be putting in these changes to the loan docs. It's not consideration on our part, it's just here are the latest and greatest. Here's a reflection of our requirements that's kind of more up to date. And so, yes, we would be asking to redocument if you asked us to subordinate to a new first, if you asked us to, you know, pull out our maturity for some reason, anything that would alter the terms and conditions of our existing loans. So we'd be phasing in on a loan by loan basis.
So if there are no loans associated with that property, this is not going to affect them.
That's right. We are using our powers as a lender at this point to effectuate these requirements. That said, you know, if we had provided financing, but it was all paid off, but the restriction remained in place, and then you needed to come to us for a request, that would be fair game to put it into the restriction to implement it in that deal. But us just acting as a bond issuer, no. Us acting as under police powers, doing inclusionary housing, which could result in a rental unit being restricted, not at this time. Development agreement deals, all fair game. So there was a slide on this. Also, we've been talking to the county, OSH, and we've been talking to VTA. And it's possible that even if the city does not have funding in a given deal, but that VTA or OSH does, or, something of value like the ground lease, that they would effectuate that on the city's behalf on San Jose deals. So those conversations are pending. But that would be our hope, kind of on a negotiated basis. With VTA,
Okay, and
us negotiating with VTA and the county.
okay, so my question was like OSH is specifically who we work with on OSH, work with on OSH's PSH property. So you would want to implement these at PSH properties?
No, I think you missed the presentation. This is only for units that are available for the general public. It does not have anything to do with special needs units with a managed queue, none of that.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
this is just the general population. That does include seniors, but it does not include anything that is otherwise a special need population. This is really about units otherwise available to the general public.
Okay.
Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah. And again, the commensurate unit mix would be based on the part of the property that would have general available units, right? So if you had special needs units that were all studios, but the rest of the project had a mix of studios 1s and 2s, the commensurate unit mix would be based on the studios 1s and 2s. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. One more program that I'm just wondering, the TIP program, would that be subject to this?
No, because that's a managed queue and those are special needs units at the time, while they are identified as TIP units. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Right. Good question. Good. Any other questions? All right, Mindy, you want to show the last slide?
Sure. Great. So to close out, just want to thank you everyone for coming. And if we had the chat function, I would be putting in the chat function our website, and also if you'd like to sign up for updates and for beta testing as well. But what I'm going to do is after this meeting, I'll just send an email to everybody with all of our links, and then also this recording and the slides will be posted on our webpage. And I will send that out after the meeting.
Thank you. With all of the links live, so you don't have to type anything.
Yeah. So, and apologies for not having the chat function.
Thanks. Yeah, so there is a web page on our tenant preferences work. There's some background information. There's a general timeline there. That is the page that we would morph and we'd start posting all of the backup material, the council memos, the housing commission memo, all of the approvals, and as well as the disparate impact analysis itself, which is actually required under that new state law that we talked about, SB 649. That we have to post the backup as to why we think it's legal. So, and the interpretation. So we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Is anyone, and please contact us after again if you'd like to. We'll need to hash through, I think, with John Stewart and with USA, this back end feed question maybe. And then if anyone's interested in being a beta tester, feel free to contact us, because I think it'll be fun. It'll be in January, but it'll be your way to make sure that you're comfortable for your company that that this is going to be a smooth interface for how you work. Mindy, anything else?
No, that's it. Yes, I wasn't sure if you had anything else to say, but if you don't mind, I can close it out and just thank everybody. Or
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Please.
So thank you so much for attending and spending this afternoon with us. I'll be sending out the links, and unless we do have 9 minutes left. So if there are any other final questions, please ask them now. If not, just feel free to email me. And I will send that follow-up email right after this.
And a final thank you to Matthew, to Emily, to Regina for SV at Home for hosting this meeting. We really appreciate your partnership, trying to get the lowdown skinny on the things that make our programs work better for you all and for the community. So thank you. Great.
All right.
All right.
thank you.
Happy holidays, everyone. If you have a question you want to ask with nobody else around, you can hang on while others leave. Feel free.
I'm going to stop recording.
Oh, Manuel, thank you. Sorry, I
course.
missed you.
No worries.
You're